All right, let's dive into the epic saga of one of Ireland's most powerful and honestly most fascinating dynasties, Clan O'Neill. We're talking mythic kings, legendary warriors, and a story of sovereignty, resistance, and unbelievable resilience. Now, just so you know, this whole explainer is drawn from an amazing new book called Clan O'Neill, History of Clan O'Neill, which is part of the Ancient Clans of Ireland series. So let's get into it. To really get the O'Neills, you have to start with their famous war cry, Lám Dearg Éireann Abu. That means the Red Hand of Ireland forever. And trust me, this isn't just some catchy motto. It's a declaration of who they are, a shout of defiance that has echoed across battlefields for centuries, and it's tied right to the very heart of Ulster. So, let me ask you this. What would you be willing to sacrifice for a kingdom? I mean, really sacrifice, for absolute rule over a land that you crave? It's a heavy question, right? But it frames the entire O'Neill story, right from its brutal, legendary beginning.
That whole idea of sacrifice is at the core of the clan's founding myth. The legend is just wild. It tells of a boat race to claim the land of Ulster. As one chieftain's boat started to fall behind, he made this final, desperate move. He literally cut off his own hand and threw it to the shore, making sure his blood was the first to touch the land. That bloody hand became the Red Hand of Ulster, a seriously powerful symbol of winning at any, and I mean any, cost.
Even the clan's name itself is just steeped in power. It comes from the Gaelic O'Neill, which means descendant of Néill. And the name Néill? It translates as champion. So from the very beginning, the O'Neill name was basically synonymous with leadership and victory. No pressure, right? And this history isn't just legend. The O'Neills can trace their direct ancestry to a real person, Niall Glundubh, who was a High King of Ireland and died in battle way back in 919. But their mythic roots? They go back even further, to the almost legendary Niall of the Nine Hostages, a 5th century king who basically dominated Ireland. This incredible lineage is what established them as the Gaelic family in the north, cementing their rule over the heart of Ulster. So, how did this legendary bloodline translate into actual real-world power? Well, it was all about building a really sophisticated Gaelic kingdom, a political and cultural machine that would go on to dominate Ulster for centuries.
And at the absolute center of O'Neill power was this place, Tullagog Fort. Now, don't picture a big stone castle. This was something different, an ancient, sacred earthwork. It was right here at the spiritual and political heart of their kingdom that every single O'Neill chief was made king. This ground was just soaked in tradition and power.
The inauguration ritual itself was this incredibly powerful ceremony. The new chief would be enthroned on a sacred stone, the Leek Nari, or the Stone of the King. Then he was handed a straight white rod, a symbol of his duty to rule with justice and purity. And finally, he swore an oath, binding him not just to his people, but to the land itself. This was a kingship that was rooted in sacred duty. And this kingship was supported by a really complex social structure under their own native law, called Brehon law. The chief, or the Rí, wasn't some absolute monarch. He was actually elected. The Tánaiste was the chosen successor, which was a clever way to prevent bloody power struggles. And crucially, you had the Brehons, who were the lawyers and judges, and the Olam, the chief poets and historians who kept the clan's stories and history alive. This was a society that valued law and history just as much as it valued military strength. But as you can probably guess, this ancient Gaelic world was on a collision course with a rising global power. And this brings us to the O'Neills' greatest conflict, their incredible resistance against the Tudor conquest of Ireland, a fight that would become the last stand for Gaelic Ireland itself. And right at the center of that resistance was one man, Hugh O'Neill. This guy was fascinating. He was educated in the English court, but he was Gaelic to his very core. He was a master politician, a brilliant general, and the man who would unite the Irish clans for one last epic fight for their sovereignty. The conflict, which we call the 9 Years' War, was a total roller coaster of highs and lows. In 1598, Hugh O'Neill did the impossible at the Battle of the Yellow Ford. He completely annihilated a professional English army. It was the single greatest defeat the English crown had ever suffered in Ireland. But just a few years later, at the Battle of Kinsale, the tide turned dramatically. A combined Irish and Spanish force was defeated, and the alliance was shattered. The war ended with O'Neill's surrender, and in 1607, he and other Gaelic lords fled Ireland in what's known as the Flight of the Earls, a moment that truly marked the end of the old Gaelic world. Ultimately, this wasn't just a war, it was a clash of two entirely different worlds. On one side, you had O'Neill's Gaelic alliances and his fearsome Gallagally mercenaries fighting to defend their native way of life. And on the other, you had the professional Tudor army with its advanced firepower fighting to expand a colonial empire. The stakes just could not have been higher. So you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? The Gaelic order in Ireland was broken. But for the O'Neills, their story was far from over. In fact, their defeat forged a new global legacy. The Red Hand was about to rise again, all over the world. You see, the Flight of the Earls was just the beginning of a huge migration that scattered the clan across the globe. To put it in perspective, by 2010, just in the United States alone, there were over 40,000 people with the last name O'Neill. And their influence popped up everywhere. In the United States, their descendants became political leaders, like the famous Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. In Europe, they served as elite soldiers known as the Wild Geese. They were settlers in Australia, ranchers in Argentina, and they built strong communities in Canada. In every new land, that O'Neill legacy of leadership just adapted and thrived. So in the end, the O'Neill story is so much more than just a dusty chapter in a history book. It really is a living legacy, a powerful story about the fight for sovereignty, what it means to be resilient, and the enduring power of an identity that can be carried all across the globe. We've really only scratched the surface of this incredible saga. If you want to explore the full history, from the rituals at Tuathaig to the global diaspora, the source for this whole explainer is the book Clann O'Néill, History of Clann Néill. It's part of the fantastic Ancient Clans of Ireland series, and you can get it right now on Amazon. We've dropped the link in the description for you. Thanks for joining us.